If you were to tell someone a year ago, scratch that, 2 months ago, that Cyno and Wriothesley, who were seen as underperforming DPSs, are now shaping up to be top 5, potentially top 3 DPSs, outscaling Movuika and Skirk, and competing with Zibai, you would have rightfully been called insane. But I'm here to tell you that with Odette, Alyosha, which we'll talk about in this video, and everything else in the version 7.0 beta, they are indeed this good. Hello there, Flip here, and today we're going to be going over Stellar Conduct in more details, and the improvements they're getting from both Odette and Alyosha, and we'll be looking at Sandrone, Wriothesley, Cyno, as well as how good their vertical investment is, and Odette's vertical investment is. There's just so much to talk about. But before we do that, as always, if at any point during the video you are entertained or informed, make sure to drop a like and even consider subscribing, as I talk on various topics regarding Genshin's meta, and I'll try to keep you updated. Shout out to my lovely, beautiful channel members. I really appreciate your support. It means the world to me. I hope you guys are surviving in this heatwave. It's been going on for way too long. Hashtag fuck summer. And there's no sponsor for today's video, so let's just get right into it. We're going to start off this video by doing our favorite thing, recapping. So let's explain what Stellar Conduct does once again. Whenever Cryo and Electro react with each other and you have a Stellar Conduct enabler on your team, instead of doing superconduct damage, this is going to create a stellar field instead. And while you're in a stellar field, you're going to gain certain buffs depending on how high your stellar field's level is. Your stellar field's level depends on how much Cryo and Electro you apply, and your stellar field is going to refresh itself every 4 seconds, so you want to continuously have high Electro and Cryo application so your stellar field's level remains high. And being within a stellar field will also give unique buffs to certain characters, and also enable some characters to deal direct stellar conduct damage. And with the character that's going to be the primary focus for today's video, Odette, she of course gains benefits for being in a stellar conduct field. Speaking of Odette actually, a lot of the comments in my last video were confused on what her role in teams were. To make it clearer, Odette is a cryo stellar sub DPS, and she has very good buffing on top of this. For a lunar equivalent, she functions as the Columbina for this team archetype, enabling both stellar conduct and stellar swirl reactions, so she will create a stellar conduct field for everyone. She also gives a 14% base damage multiplier to stellar conduct and stellar swirl, which is stronger than Columbina's 7% to all lunar reactions. And besides her sub DPS, with her Ascension 1 she gives a team-wide 60% stellar damage bonus, so she's a sub DPS and support for stellar teams. You are not going to play her as an on-field DPS. I don't know how that was a takeaway from my last video. Most of her utility is coming from when she is off-field. And for a character I didn't talk about in my last video, the new 4-star... Fuck. Give me 2 seconds. Hello?
Hi.
You know the 4-star that's coming next patch?
Alyosha?
What?
Alyosha.
It's not Alyosha.
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 That's better.
Thank you. Oh, also, Odette. How do you say her name? Is it Odette?
Well, if we look at the ballet, it's Odetta. But
Oh,
in English, just Odette.
just say Odette. Okay, thank you. Goodbye.
Good luck.
This is going to be in a video.
Sure.
The new 4-star Alyosha, for one, you're going to be getting him for free, and he's very, very good. Well, very, very good at C6. He's just okay at C2, which is what most people will have pulling for Odette. Alyosha is also a support that has okay sub DPS, low by today's standards, but it's still relatively good. His skill marks opponents with the Hunter's Mark, that when activated gives a team-wide 24% attack buff, and if Alyosha is in a stellar field, he will also give the team a 25% stellar conduct damage bonus. And for how you activate the Hunter's Mark to gain these buffs, this will be via his Elemental Burst. Alyosha will set up a field that does continuous electro damage and taunts enemies, and he'll also summon a dog to fight alongside him, who also attacks enemies every 2 seconds, and whenever damage is dealt to an enemy that has the Hunter's Mark, this will trigger the Hunter's Mark, giving you all of the buffs. Alyosha is also a healer with his Ascension 1, giving you healing based on his attack whenever his dog attacks enemies, and this is team-wide healing, and his Ascension 4 gives him extra skill and burst damage based on his energy recharge. Now he's a 4-star, so I'm just going to put all his constellations up on screen. The only ones that are really stand out are his C2 and C6. The rest honestly aren't that important. The C2 gives a duration increase, increasing the amount of damage Alyosha is going to do, as well as allowing his already long buffs to last much longer, as well as making activating Hunter's Mark marks more consistent in AoE and multi-wave content. And with his ludicrous C6, unlike Eonson and Farazon, his C6 doesn't really have any quality of life benefits, but it allows you to have 2 Hunter's Marks that can both be activated, doubling the buffs Alyosha does, so he now gives a total of 48% attack at talent level 9, as well as 50% Stellar Conduct damage bonus, and then to add the cherry on top, he will also give a team-wide 100 elemental mastery when you activate both Hunter's Marks. That is such a ludicrous amount of buffing, especially considering his buffs are team-wide and have such long uptime. So in terms of quality of life, Alyosha is going to be quite an easy 4-star to use. You just use his skill and burst, and you get all of your buffs, and they last a very long time and are team-wide. So with his C2, he's never really going to feel uncomfortable to play. It's just that his C6 is such a big damage increase. It's a bigger jump than Eonson's C2 to C6, and a bigger jump than Farazon's C2 and C6. So while Alyosha doesn't really have gameplay issues past C2, unlike Eonson and Farazon that can feel quite uncomfortable, the buff his C6 gives is the most impactful. This would be the equivalent of if they moved Eonson's 3-second duration increase to her C2 from her C6, while moving Eonson's C2 30% attack increase to her C6. It's ludicrous. Now with the context of both Odette and Alyosha in mind, do these units replace Yai, as that's what so many people want to happen? And no, they do not. For starters, on an individual level, Yai is still the most important teammate to Sandrone and Stellar Conduct in general. Her damage and buffing is just that good. And Odette and Alyosha increase her value in Stellar Conduct teams, instead of taking it away. In a lot of Yai's previous teams, she wasn't really getting strong team-wide buffs, but that changes with Alyosha and Odette, as they are very strong team-wide buffers, so they're going to buff Yai as well, making her even stronger in Stellar Conduct teams. So since Yai is still the strongest character in these teams, even if they were to release another Stellar Conduct support, which I don't think they're going to do anytime soon, Alyosha or Odette are going to be the characters that get replaced before Yai, so it seems like Yai is still a safe bet into Stellar Conduct teams. The only thing that hurts Yai's pull value is the fact that Odette works for both Stellar Swirl and Stellar Conduct, and Sandrone is now getting Stellar Swirl scalings, and someone like Sandrone being a Stellar Swirl DPS is not something anyone really knew was going to happen, so this lowers Yai's value for Sandrone specifically, as it means you can just get Odette and any future Stellar Swirl support, and you most likely will have a very strong Sandrone Stellar Swirl team. So if you don't have the pulls or don't want to force yourself to pull Yai, in that case I can recommend skipping Yai so that you can secure Odette, and then from Odette I would save to pull for the future Stellar Swirl support. So yes, Yai is still going to stay dominant in Stellar Conduct teams, just not Stellar teams in general, and I don't even think this really lowers Yai's pull value, as you're still going to need a Stellar Conduct team anyways for the bosses that are only vulnerable to Stellar Conduct damage, like the boss in the Stygian in a few days, and once again, Yai is still best in slot for Stellar Conduct, so regardless, you're still going to want both Stellar Conduct and Stellar Swirl teams anyways. So yeah, actually speaking of Yai, to show how much the Genshin developers love messing with me, they randomly decided to change when Yai's Stellar hit happens, going from the 2nd hit every wave to the 3rd hit in every wave, which would change some things slightly but overall not be a real DPS gain or loss. And then, in that same day, in the next few hours, they randomly undid this change. So why did they even change it in the first place? Then not only that, let's talk about the craftable weapons. The trigger condition for their buffs to activate are dependent on proccing an elemental reaction, with the passive buffs lasting for 12 seconds. So for characters like Yai and Odette, you want to be able to consistently trigger this twice a rotation. For some reason, dealing direct Stellar Conduct damage doesn't count as a reaction trigger, so it won't activate the passive, which kind of sucks as there's no way for everyone in a Stellar Conduct team to reliably get this passive up when it needs to be triggered, and your on-field units are basically never going to get a reaction trigger from this. So while the Claymore and Catalyst would have been very good for Wriothesley and Sandrone, since the passives don't activate from direct Stellar Conduct damage, or at least it seems that way right now, it doesn't seem like it's worth running for them over their current good options. And then for Yai and Odette, in most cases they're only reliably going to get one trigger of the passive per rotation, and only 2 in some teams, so once again the weapon will fluctuate in viability for them. Also, for anyone inquiring about the Cryo Traveler, I haven't yet looked at the Cryo Traveler or how good Stellar Swirl is going to be yet. I don't even think the Cryo Traveler is a support in Stellar Conduct teams anyways, but I will talk about the Traveler and his viability in stellar teams later, so don't worry about that. And before getting into the calculations, if you want to know how good your stellar teams are going to be with Odette and Alyosha and any of the new things in 7.0, over on my Ko-fi, which is linked in the description below, you can request team calculations for anything you want, and I'll even gladly do it with your own builds and assumptions. And if you can't do that, don't worry, just liking and sharing my video if you're enjoying it is more than enough. Let's talk about the calcs now. Now starting with Sandrone, here are two teams for her with Yai and Odette, with Chi-Chi and Alyosha being the flex slots. And if you watched my previous video on Odette, you would know this comfortably lands Sandrone as arguably the best DPS in the game. And it's even more impressive as you can consider this is without her reliance on a 4-star. So unlike Zibai teams who do lose a bit of power from not having a C6 Illawa, Sandrone is this high of a DPS spot, and all of her teammates are guaranteed assuming you can pull for them. You don't need to gamble extra pulls if that makes sense. And if we are using C6 4-stars as a comparison, then as you can see with the bottom text, this further elevates Sandrone's performance into being the first 200k DPS character at this standard, which would make her the definitive best DPS in the game. But again, that is reliant on you pulling for a C6 4-star, which isn't realistic. I would know as I spent $300 for a C6 Illawa. Now to more directly compare Odette and Yai, for anyone who's going to be skipping Yai right now, here is pretty much exactly that. Yai is just a more important pull for Sandrone, and if the craftables ever get fixed, the gap between this is going to be even bigger. And hell, even if you are missing an Odette, or you're missing a Yai, being in the 140k DPS range is still very good. Like, this is still among one of the stronger teams in the game. So at the very least, as long as you can secure one of the two, I wouldn't worry about the performance of your Sandrone that much. She is going to be good. And if you aren't planning to get Odette and want to stick with your current Sandrone teams, pretty much just the supportive set alone is giving you a very good DPS bump. Now to look at vertical investment a bit, I'll just put everything on screen, but here are all the vertical investment calculations I did for Odette with Sandrone. Odette C1 is going to be an 11% team DPS increase. Odette C1 gives her an extra stellar hit, as well as 30% more team-wide stellar buffs, which results in around an 11% team DPS increase. And with Odette C2, it offers both a strong attack buff and team-wide rush red, which is something Sandrone teams have been really lacking actually, with all of Sandrone's best supports not being rush redders mostly. And C2 Odette is going to provide that, and as you can see, it is a very strong damage increase, being a 45% team DPS increase from C0. And the reason I'm highlighting this is because, well, Sandrone's vertical investment herself kind of sucks, and I think makes her feel worse to play. So you really can just get Odette's vertical investment instead. It's most likely going to be better long term, and they're similar to getting Sandrone stuff. Oh, and also don't pull for Odette's signature weapon, it's complete garbage, only being a 5% team DPS increase. Odette's weapon for some reason doesn't offer team-wide buffing like some of the other supports, and instead gives an energy refund to Odette herself, but Odette's burst isn't worth using, so there's really no reason to pull for her weapon in my opinion. Now enough about Sandrone for now, let's talk about Wriothesley. For Wriothesley, he couldn't really use his stellar buffs without Sandrone before, so you pretty much had to play a 3-man team for him to work. Thankfully now Odette is a real character, so you no longer have to do that, in which case I calculated 2 teams, one being with Yai and one being Yailess, and once again these are quite good numbers. Wriothesley being about 160k DPS with both Odette and Yai, funnily enough makes him have a stronger cryo team than Skirk. But once again, for what's important, Wriothesley is very strong. This is around Nefer levels of DPS, making him comfortably top 5, DPSs theoretically at least, and what actually matters is that for any stellar shilling, Wriothesley is going to handle that more than capably, especially since I know so many people have constellations on Wriothesley. Oh, and I guess I didn't talk about this with Sandrone, but Nicole isn't that important to this team, don't worry. It's like before with all the other Sandrone flex slots. You can put Sucrose here, you can put Shalon in here. In fact, no burst Escofia is technically the best in slot for this team, even over Nicole. So don't worry, she's the least important member of this team and can be easily flexed out for other characters. The only characters Wriothesley can't put on his team are healers, so you can't put Chi-Chi here as her healing is unconditional. You can technically put Diona here and just not burst with her, but she isn't really doing much in that case. And Alyosha is a healer, and he heals unconditionally if you manage to get his C4. And if you're not aware why healing is bad for Wriothesley, Wriothesley's only going to get his special charge attack, that's stellar damage, when he is below 60% HP. Having really good healers doesn't allow this to happen, or even some minor healing, as you'll constantly go above that mark, and not very often get the special charge attack. This special charge attack is the highest multiplier for Wriothesley, so it is nice for him to be able to consistently get it, which he can't with a healer like Alyosha or Chi-Chi. Daichi. Technically, if you do have a C6 Alyosha, his buffs are so strong that it's worth it at C0 for Wriothesley to just skip his charge attack entirely and spam normal attacks. And that is technically Wriothesley's best team, technically. But in my opinion, I don't think it's important to calculate that, as for one, it depends on you having a C6 Alyosha, and two, if you have Wriothesley's constellations, like his C1 and C2, his charge attacks are going to become even stronger, meaning that eventually you are still going to want to drop Alyosha and use his charge attacks, as they're just that good. So Alyosha being best in slot for Wriothesley is a very niche circumstance, which I don't think will happen to anyone, and therefore I don't think it's worth seriously evaluating. It's just something cool that can be done. And speaking of vertical investment, here are all the vertical investment calcs I did for Wriothesley. This is showcasing how strong Wriothesley C1 and C2 are, in which Wriothesley C1 is conditionally good. Wriothesley kind of has an issue where his skill uptime isn't enough for some teams, if some other characters on the team have very long skill or burst cooldowns. So because of that, you have to sometimes find ways to stall. That is why Odette is using her burst every other rotation in a Wriothesley team. It's just so you have enough time for all the skills to go off cooldown. With C1 though, this is going to increase the amount of time Wriothesley can spend on field due to the duration increase. And in teams where there is a lot of downtime, like beta for example, as your rotation length is 20 seconds, Wriothesley C1 is going to be a very good constellation, as it allows you to fill in that downtime with more normal attacks on Wriothesley. But in teams where you don't need to fill for downtime, then Wriothesley C1 is just 50% stellar damage bonus to some of Wriothesley's attacks, which actually isn't that good. So yeah, Wriothesley C1 is the potential man constellation. For a constellation that's very, very good though, we have Wriothesley C2, which is just a 50% direct increase to all of Wriothesley's stellar multipliers, and that is a very huge constellation, as you can see from the calculations, and also putting Wriothesley over the 200k DPS mark, and even very close to it with Beidou instead of Yai. And now let's move on to talk about Cyno. I also calculated two teams for him, one being with Nicole and the other being with Alyosha. Both of these teams are very good, it doesn't matter. But with Alyosha, since his buffs just last for so long, you are actually able to use Cyno to his fullest of fullest uptimes and do 4 NCR rotations with him. And it's like actually the viable and recommended way to play him with Alyosha. So for any Cyno mains, I would try to get both Odette and Alyosha, at the very minimum a C2 Alyosha, and you can see at the bottom how good a C2 Alyosha is. And here are all the Cyno vertical things I did. I've already talked about what C1 and C2 Odette do, and the other calculations are with his weapon, which is just one of the biggest stat sticks in the game. So yes, Cyno is getting a massive boost from Alyosha and Odette, and like with Wriothesley, he's going to be more than capable of being your stellar conduct DPS check. And now to wrap this video up with the last calculation I did, outside of the stellar conduct DPSs, I wanted to see how good the Odette and Yai wheelchair was. I know Lohen was a character a lot of people pulled for, thinking he would be very good in stellar teams, which is why it's funny that he has no stellar conduct scalings. But because of Lohen's really fast cryo application, he's able to get very high levels on his stellar field. And even though he doesn't do stellar damage directly, if you pair him with someone like Nicole, he still gets quite good buffs. And so putting all of that together, Lohen still ends up being a quite good driver for stellar teams. I do think this is decent enough performance to where he can maybe consistently clear fearless shill bosses, but not anything further than that really, unless you have a lot of investment on him. So yeah, the stellar wheelchair is something that is transferable to other characters. Any cryo and electro character can really utilize it. The only thing that's annoying for Lohen specifically, or I guess the reason why I wouldn't really do this with him, is that he kind of just has better teams with Nicole and Durin, and it is also kind of a waste of Yai and Odette. So I wouldn't go out of your way to play this team, as Lohen just has better teams, but it's still not a bad team at all, and it's something you can do if you want to keep playing him. But with that, I have nothing else to say, so thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on stellar teams, as I would love to hear it and I respond to almost every single comment. Channel members, thank you so much for your continued support. It means the world to me. I love you all. Thank you to everyone else for watching the video.
And I'll see you guys on the flip side.
Peace.